Hi, everybody. You were already sent this graphic organizer by me, but I did include it in the email. I want to give you just a brief overview of what you need to do for this virtual TBT meeting. So, you have this graphic organizer. I attached it in this email as well. I thought it would be better for me just to explain this via video so that way my writing doesn't get, misinterpreted. Also attached to this email, I've included the portrait of a graduate explanations here. So that way, if you don't really know what the title means, you can read, the little explanation. And then lastly, this is a one pager that Jody sent out to us this morning in a meeting that explains MLS's practices in the classroom. So you can look at this as well. It's in the email if you needed a little bit more explanation as to what a teaching practice is. Okay, so here's what's being asked of you. If you would take a couple minutes to consider how each of these sections apply to your own classroom space or your learning space, and how you are either modeling this for your students or teaching these skills to your students or encouraging the learners to grow in these areas. It's important that you focus more on the behavior and the teaching practices and the learning environment than you do the curriculum. For example, when we read To Kill a Mockingbird, we're teaching empathetic global citizenship, but that's curriculum based. That's not necessarily our classroom environment or teaching practices. Okay, so take a few minutes and reflect on those. And in these boxes, talk about how you do that with your teaching practices, with your learning environment. So a couple bullet points. And it's okay if you don't have one for something, just what you do feel like you can reflect on, put it in the box, or obviously just type it in the email to me. Okay, then this is where it gets a little vague. So I want to make sure I explain this well. In the needs and wants section, what you need to do is think about when we're building this building that will hopefully open in the next 3 years. What is something that you think that we need or that you want to see in the building? And what's important to do, though, is to tie it back into one of these areas of Portrait of a Graduate. What they're trying to prevent is, like Tom gave an example of, he met with the principal from Carlisle when they were touring that building, and that principal said there's a lot of space that like felt cool to build or whatever, but there was no purpose for it, and so now they don't really know how to utilize it. So they have this like cool loft area, I guess, but it's not really being utilized for any purpose, and so our district is trying to prevent that kind of stuff. So let me give you an example. If you are thinking that it would be really cool to have like pull out pods, like learning pods with like, I don't know, booths or something like that at the end of the hallway, you could tie that into being a respectful collaborator, because students are able to meet together and gather in that space in a small group setting to really dive into their work in small groups. Or, SPED teachers could pull students out there where they could thrive in a more personalized learning environment. So that would be tying it back to the Portrait of a Graduate. Another example, like for me, when I looked at the Middletown building, they had these little stages at the end of their building, and I thought that was so cool for an ELA environment. So I can't just say like I want a stage because I want to put Romeo and Juliet on a stage, but I could tie it back into the purposeful, effective communicator, because by giving students the stage, they get practice speaking in front of small crowds publicly, which helps them with their purposeful, effective communication, that kind of a thing. I do think that we will struggle to find something for each of the categories. That's not the goal. The goal is to think about, when we're looking at the building that we're going to build in the future, what are things that we need from our department. We're not talking the whole school. Every department's doing this. What are things you need for your department? And then can I tie that back to a Portrait of a Graduate? If so, how? So you may only have like 2 or 3 things here. That's totally fine. You may not be able to tie you may not be able to have something for each category. That's fine. Okay. I also realize that this doesn't necessarily apply to everybody. If you're not going to be with us in 3 years when we're in the next building, whatever. Still, your responses are super helpful because you're able to reflect on your experience at Monroe. And if you were here in the future, what would be better suited for you or for students and staff who will be here. I also do think that our feedback is valuable. I think that they are listening to what we want and need. I think that they learned from their mistakes of the past where maybe teachers' wants and needs were not listened to, and they are hoping to really tap into that. So this is a good opportunity to have some input and to maybe be positive about what the future holds.